Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. When you think of Rapa Nui, Easter Island, what probably comes to mind first are those incredible moai statues, right?
Absolutely. Those massive stone figures just standing there gazing out. They're iconic.
Totally iconic, silent, mysterious, looking out over the vast Pacific. It's one of those big human mysteries.
It really is.
But what if I told you that sort of beneath the surface of that mystery, the one everyone knows, there's another one, maybe even deeper, arguably more profound?
Ah, you've hit on it. Rongorongo.
Exactly.
It's like this silent library from a completely lost world. And it's not just, some historical footnote.
No, not at all.
We're talking about the only known indigenous script developed in all of Polynesia. That alone is huge.
And it's this unique system of glyphs, these symbols, that has just completely baffled researchers for, over 150 years?
Yeah, baffled and fascinated. It's just stubbornly refused to give up its secrets.
Which is exactly why we're doing this deep dive today. Our mission, really, is to unpack the core mysteries of Rongorongo, these interlocking puzzles.
Where did it come from? That's the big one.
Right. Where did it come from? What kind of system even is it? Is it proper writing like we think of it, or something else?
And maybe the most tantalizing question. What do the few texts we actually have say?
Yeah.
What knowledge is locked away in them?
Yeah. So we're going to try and synthesize everything: historical records, archaeology, linguistics, and the really cutting-edge scientific research that's happening right now.
And the stakes here are, well, they're incredibly high. You have to remember Rapa Nui's isolation. It's just extreme.
Over 1,000 miles from anywhere else inhabited, right?
Exactly. Which raises this extraordinary possibility. Could Rongorongo be one of only a handful of independent inventions of writing in all of human history?
Wow.
If that turns out to be true, it puts the Rapa Nui people right up there intellectually with, the ancient Sumerians, the Egyptians, the Chinese, the Mesoamericans.
Cultures that created writing completely from scratch. No blueprint.
Precisely. And achieving that on the most remote inhabited island on Earth. That's just monumental.
It's an absolutely astounding thought. And that context, the extreme isolation, it's so crucial, isn't it?
It really is. Rapa Nui was essentially this unique cultural laboratory. Developments like Rongorongo, they really stand apart because of that isolation.
So it's not just like a historical curiosity.
No, it's a window. A direct window into human innovation, human capacity, under the most extreme circumstances imaginable. That creative spark flourishing out there alone.
And the truly fascinating part, or maybe frustrating part, is that despite all this time, all this effort, the script is still silent.
Stubbornly silent. That's really why we're diving deep. It's one of the world's great undeciphered writing systems.
A genuine intellectual challenge.
Absolutely. It embodies so many unanswered questions about language, culture, how humans think, how they record things, and it forces us to confront, the limits of what we know.
And the profound losses that can happen when a culture's knowledge gets cut off.
Yeah, it's like finding this ancient sealed book from a civilization we barely understand. We know it's important, but we can't read it.
Okay, so let's really try and unpack this. Before we can even guess at what Rongorongo says, we need to get a handle on what it is.
Physically, what are we dealing with?
Exactly. We're talking about this finite, completely irreplaceable collection of artifacts. Every single detail on them is a clue. The wood, the shape, the marks.
Everything matters.
And the first shocking thing is just how few there are. The tragic scarcity. You mentioned a 19th century missionary, Brother Ayerod.
Yes, in 1864, his report is crucial.
He reported seeing hundreds of these inscribed tablets in every household he visited on Rapa Nui. Hundreds.
Just imagine that. A widespread literacy, or at least widespread presence of these objects.
And yet today, the authenticated corpus, the real deal artifacts we know of, it's just 25 to 27 objects.
25 to 27. Down from potentially hundreds.
It's not just a small collection. It's a monumental, just heartbreaking loss. An entire literary tradition practically vanished.
And that loss is compounded because the few pieces that did survive aren't even together. They're scattered.
Right, they're all over the globe now. Museums, private collections, Europe, the Americas, Chile.
And crucially, not a single authenticated piece remains on Rapa Nui itself.
That's unbelievable. None on the island.
None, which is such a poignant symbol, really, of the cultural dislocation the island went through. We're talking major institutions holding these keys.
Places like the Ethnological Museum in Berlin, the Smithsonian in D.C.
The Congregation of the Sacred Hearts in Rome. They acquired them mostly in the late 19th century, often from early expeditions or missionaries.
Probably without fully grasping just how culturally significant these things were at the time.
Likely not, no. They were curiosities, perhaps, not the remnants of a unique writing system.
So we have these scattered remnants, and the script isn't just on flat wooden tablets like you might picture. It shows up in different forms.
That's right. The majority are these wooden tablets, the kohau, rongorongo, and often they're quite irregular shapes.
Which already tells you something about the materials available, right? Wood must have been scarce.
Exactly. That scarcity is a running theme. But then you have things like the Santiago staff,
Oh, that one's incredible. A ceremonial staff, right? For a chieftain.
a magnificent piece.
Mm-hmm.
And it has the longest single text, several thousand glyphs just winding around it.
Imagine holding that, knowing it holds so many stories, but you can't access them.
It's mesmerizing.
Uh.
And beyond the staff and tablets, it appears on other culturally significant items too.
Like what?
Well, there's a rei imiro. That's a crescent-shaped pectoral ornament, usually worn by high-status people, chiefs.
So, associated with leadership.
Definitely. There's also a small statuette of a birdman, the Tangata Manu. He was a central figure in later Rapa Nui rituals, especially the famous birdman competition.
Finding the script on that really links it to their cosmology and rituals.
It does. And then perhaps the most grim example, it's even found inscribed on a human skull.
On a skull? Wow. What does that suggest?
It hints at really esoteric uses. Maybe funerary rites, ancestor veneration, something deeply spiritual and perhaps restricted.
And there was even an anecdotal account, wasn't there? About tattoos.
Yes, an account of a man who reportedly had a Rongorongo text tattooed right on his back. So the script could be inscribed on the human body itself, not just objects.
That's amazing. So let's maybe name a few specific artifacts, just to give people a better sense. You mentioned the Tahua tablet.
Ah yes, the oar. Literally carved on the European oar blade.
Which is fascinating in itself, a big clue for some of the origin theories.
Definitely fuels this stimulus diffusion idea we'll get into. Then there's moai.
The one with the lunar calendar.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Tablet C. Crucially, it contains the only section of Rongorongo that's been partially and reliably deciphered. We'll absolutely come back to moai. It's our one real window.
Okay, and Echancre. Tablet D.
That's the game changer we mentioned earlier regarding dating. Radiocarbon dated, it's wood, to the 15th century, pre-European contact.
We'll definitely unpack that debate. And the Santiago staff, just for the sheer scale of it.
The longest text, over 1,600 glyphs. A huge, silent narrative just sitting there. Each piece is like a fragment from this lost library, a puzzle piece.
Okay, so let's dig into the materials a bit more. Wood was the main thing, and it was scarce. How did that scarcity impact the script itself?
Profoundly. The island suffered severe deforestation over centuries, as we know. So finding suitable wood for carving must have been incredibly difficult.
They had to use whatever they could find, irregular pieces.
Exactly. Irregular, maybe blemished pieces, they used them entirely. And this constraint likely pushed the script towards a very condensed style, almost telegraphic.
To save space.
To save precious space, yes. You see frequent use of ligatures combining multiple glyphs into one complex sign. It's a fantastic example of environment shaping intellectual output.
And the type of wood itself sparked this whole debate about where Rongorongo came from. The driftwood theory seemed plausible for a while.
It did, especially with Takoa being an oar blade. It pointed towards a post-contact origin, using materials brought by Europeans or washed ashore.
But then modern science complicated things.
Significantly. Botanical analysis threw a wrench in that simple picture. They found that the moai tablet and some Berlin tablets were carved from Pacific rosewood, moai.
Which grew on the island.
It did grow on the island, yes.
Yeah.
Which directly counters the it's all driftwood idea for all the tablets. And finding large enough pieces of moai would have been very difficult after the main deforestation period, suggesting maybe an earlier carving date for those pieces.
So that opened the door for a pre-contact origin again.
It did. But conversely, other tablets are demonstrably carved on non-native woods. European ash, even a South African.
What did African? Wow.
Yeah. So that confirms external sources, probably shipwrecks or salvaged European items, were also used. It's a mix. It's complex, not a simple answer.
They were clearly incredibly resourceful, using whatever came to hand, native or foreign. What about the tools? Carving these intricate glyphs must have required precision.
Oral tradition, backed up by microscopic analysis of the carvings themselves, points to some really ingenious, locally adapted tools.
Not metal tools, presumably.
No, primarily sharp flakes of obsidian, that volcanic glass found on the island. and, most notably, small, sharp shark teeth.
Shark teeth. How do they use that?
They were likely hafted, attached to a small handle, creating a kind of tiny precision engraving tool, perfect for detailed work.
Imagine the patience. Carving thousands of tiny standardized glyphs on rough wood with obsidian and shark teeth.
It speaks volumes about how much they value this. The dedication involved must have been immense.
Okay, now for maybe the weirdest, most unique visual aspect,
Right.
the writing direction. Reverse boosterphaedon. What on earth does that mean?
Right, it sounds complicated. Boosterphaedon itself is Greek as the ox turns, like plowing a field back and forth.
Okay, so zigzagging lines. Sort of. But Rongorongo is reverse boosterphaedon, which makes it even stranger. You start at the bottom left corner of the tablet.
Bottom left. Got it.
Read that first line left to right. Then, when you get to the end, you don't just drop down to the next line.
No. What do?
You physically rotate the entire tablet 180 degrees. Flip it upside down.
Seriously, rotate the whole thing.
Yep. Then you read the next line, again left to right. But now, the glyphs from the previous line are upside down relative to the line you're reading. And you repeat that for every line. Rotate, read, rotate, read.
So every other line is upside down.
Exactly. Imagine physically reading it, constantly turning the tablet back and forth. It's a totally unique, almost cumbersome way to handle linear text, found almost nowhere else.
That's incredible, like a built-in physical interaction with the text. And some tablets are fluted. What's that about?
Yeah, about a third of them have these shallow, parallel channels carved into the wood surface first.
Like guidelines. Precisely. The lines of glyphs are then carved neatly within these flukes. It served two purposes: guiding the scribe for straight, even lines, and also offering physical protection to the glyphs.
Protecting them from rubbing off or getting damaged.
Exactly. Shows real forethought in preserving the text. Very careful craftsmanship.
So we've got unique materials, ingenious tools, this wild writing direction. What about the glyphs themselves? What do they look like? How many are there?
The glyphs are highly pictorial, very standardized. Each one is about a centimeter tall, like tiny little pictures.
And they depict things from their world.
Yes, recognizable forms. Human figures in different poses, animals, lots of birds, fish, turtles, plants, stars, moons, cultural items like paddles or ornaments, and some geometric shapes too.
And the number, how many distinct symbols are we talking about?
That's where it gets daunting. Across the whole corpus, there are maybe 15,000 individual glyphs carved, but the number of distinct basic shapes is much smaller, maybe around 120.
Only 120 basic forms.
Roughly. But these basic forms are combined and modified in really complex ways. They form ligatures, add little marks, creating maybe 400 to 500 distinct variants and complex signs in total.
Wow. That complexity alone must be a huge challenge for anyone trying to decipher it.
It's a massive hurdle. Just establishing a definitive list of signs and understanding how they combine is a fundamental ongoing task.
It definitely sounds like skilled work, not just random doodles.
Oh, absolutely. The execution shows a very high level of professionalism, artistry even. The glyphs are carved confidently, precisely. It's clearly the work of trained specialists.
And you mentioned microscopic studies. What did they reveal?
They found this fascinating two-stage carving technique. It looks like they first sketched a faint outline, maybe with an obsidian flake, just to guide the placement.
Like a pencil sketch first.
Kind of, and then they went over that outline, deepening and refining it with a shark tooth tool.
Methodical, planned.
Exactly. It suggests careful planning, composition, not just spontaneous carving.
And critically, what about errors? Finding mistakes might seem minor, but you said it's actually really significant. Why?
It's hugely significant for understanding what Rongorongo is. Researchers have found clear examples of scribal errors. Glyphs carved wrong, maybe.
And corrections.
Yeah, corrections. And even palimpsests, where older text was carefully scraped off or carved over to write something new or correct.
So they cared about accuracy.
Precisely. If this was just a simple memory aid, like reminder pictures for a chant you already knew, why bother correcting a slightly off symbol? The meaning would still be clear enough to jog your memory.
Right. You wouldn't need that level of precision.
Exactly. The fact that they did correct errors strongly implies they were following rules. That accuracy mattered. It suggests Rongorongo was a formal, rule-governed system, a proper script, capable of conveying specific information, not just a loose collection of symbols. That physical evidence pushes hard against the simple mnemonic device theory.
Okay, moving into the story of its loss. It's not just about discovery, it's about this immediate destruction, almost.
The timing is just tragic. The script basically emerges into Western view, and almost simultaneously, the culture that created and understood it is obliterated.
Which is why the mystery is so deep. We lost the context, the living key.
Completely. The first documented mention, as we said, was Brother Eugene Arrow in 1864. He sees hundreds of tablets everywhere.
But then he makes that crucial, really ominous observation.
He writes that the islanders do not know how to read the hieroglyphs inscribed on them.
Which is the central paradox, right? How could a script reportedly be in every house just years before, but suddenly no one can read it?
It immediately raises questions. Was the knowledge already lost? Or maybe restricted to a tiny elite who are already gone or hiding? Or were they deliberately concealing it from him?
We don't know, but it sets the stage for the tragedy.
And the speed of the disappearance is just staggering. A few years later, by 1870, when people actually started trying to collect these things seriously.
I can only find a couple of dozen?
That's it, maybe 25, 27. The window to understand it from the people who made it slammed shut almost the instant it creaked open.
A stark reminder of cultural fragility.
And it's critical to understand how this knowledge was lost. It wasn't just fading away passively over time.
No, you called it a violent excision.
It was, not gradual forgetting, but a brutal removal. The primary blow, the catastrophe, happened just before Arod even arrived, between 1862 and 1863.
The Peruvian slave raids.
Yes. Blackbirding ships descended on Rapa Nui. They abducted a huge portion of the population, maybe 1,500 people, a massive chunk of their society.
And crucially, who did they target?
They seemed to target the island's elite. The king, Arikimau Karacario Manarangi, was taken, the leadership structure, and most devastatingly for Rongorongo.
The Tangata Rongorongo, the scribes.
Exactly. The learned specialists, the ritual experts, the keepers of the lore, the people who actually held the knowledge of the script and the sacred chants, they were specifically taken or killed.
So they literally removed the hard drive of the culture.
In essence, yes. And the horror continued. The few who were eventually repatriated, forced back by international pressure.
They brought diseases back with them.
Terrible diseases the islanders had no immunity to. Smallpox, tuberculosis. They swept through the remaining already traumatized population.
Compounding the disaster.
Absolutely. Add to that the arrival of Christian missionaries, whose teachings actively discouraged or forbade the use of the traditional pagan script. It led to what historians call a cultural decapitation.
The numbers are just horrifying.
By 1871, the population crashed from possibly 4,000 or more down to barely over 100 people.
A loss of up to 94%?
In that range, yes. The intricate web of oral tradition, ritual knowledge, genealogies, everything Rongorongo likely recorded was shattered. That's why just a few years after Arod saw hundreds of tablets, nobody reliable could be found who could actually read them. The living memory was extinguished. Brutally.
So, with that knowledge catastrophically gone, this huge debate starts. Where did Rongorongo actually come from? Was it homegrown genius or a reaction to outsiders?
That became the central, most contentious question. Independent invention versus stimulus diffusion.
Let's look at stimulus diffusion first. What's the core idea there?
The idea is that the Rapa Nui people saw Europeans using writing. They saw its power for treaties, records, communication, and they were inspired by the concept of writing.
But they didn't just copy the letters.
No, that's key. They didn't copy the Latin alphabet. They understood the idea symbols can represent language, and then they created their own system using their own unique indigenous symbols and artistic style. The idea was borrowed, but the form was local.
And Stephen Fisher had a specific theory about when this might have happened.
Yes. Fisher pointed to the Spanish annexation ceremony in 1770. Spanish explorers claimed the island, held a ceremony, and had the Rapa Nui chiefs sign a treaty.
How did they sign?
Well, according to the Spanish records, they made marks in their own letters. Fisher interprets those marks as the very first nascent Rongorongo glyphs being invented right there, stimulated by the act of signing the treaty.
So direct reaction to European contact in that specific event.
That's his specific model, yes. The concept borrowed, the form invented locally in response.
Okay, then the other major theory. Independent invention. Much more profound implications.
This is the idea that Rongorongo is a pristine script, developed entirely on Rapa Nui, in complete isolation, before any Europeans arrived, born solely from the island's own cultural evolution.
And the early evidence for this was strong, even if circumstantial.
It was compelling. First, the glyphs look like nothing else. No resemblance to European letters or any other known script system anywhere.
And usually when cultures borrow writing, they tend to keep the original shapes, right?
Exactly. As the philologist Sylvia Ferrara points out, borrowing usually involves preserving forms. Rongorongo's visual vocabulary is utterly unique. And crucially,
The connection to the island's own art.
yes, the closest visual parallels are in Rapa Nui's own ancient petroglyphs, the rock carvings found all over the island. This strongly suggests the script evolved from a deep, indigenous symbolic tradition that was already there for centuries. They weren't copying outsiders. They were systematizing their own symbols.
Okay, so for decades, this debate was basically stuck. Both theories plausible, no definitive proof either way.
It was a stalemate. All the radiocarbon dates they managed to get from tablets were 19th century, which fit perfectly well with either theory.
Until February 2024, this changes everything.
It really does. This is where cutting-edge science just blows the doors open on an old debate. A study led by Silvia Ferrara, published in Scientific Reports. High-precision radiocarbon dating on 4 specific tablets.
And 3 came back 18th, 19th century, as expected.
Yes, but 1, tablet D, Echancre, the wood it was carved from was felled between 1493 and 1509.
Wow. Let me get that straight. Late 15th, early 16th century.
More than 200 years before the first documented European arrival in 1722 by Roggeveen.
That's not just a game changer. It feels like game over for the stimulus diffusion theory, at least in its simple form.
It's a profound implication. For the first time, you have direct scientific data supporting independent pre-contact invention. The burden of proof just massively shifted. Now, those who argue for post-contact origin have to explain this piece of wood.
But there's always a but in science, isn't there? The old wood problem. Explain that.
Right. This is the crucial caveat. Radiocarbon dating tells you when the tree was alive, when it stopped absorbing carbon, basically, when it was cut down or died. It doesn't tell you exactly when the wood was carved.
So theoretically, someone could have found a really old piece of driftwood centuries later and then carved it.
Theoretically, yes. That's the old wood problem. An ancient piece of wood could have been carved much later, perhaps even post-contact.
Okay. Does anything else complicate this finding?
Yes. 2 significant things from Ferrara's study make it even more complex. First, the wood itself. Podocarpus latifolius, a type of yellow wood. It's not native to Rapa Nui.
Not native, so it had to be driftwood.
Almost certainly. And it's native to southern Africa.
Southern Africa. That means it drifted across the Atlantic and the Pacific to wash up on Easter Island, before Europeans were sailing those routes commonly.
It's an incredible journey, absolutely. Plausible ocean currents could maybe do it, but it's extraordinary. Second, for the old wood argument to hold.
What scenario does that require?
It requires a specific, unique, ancient piece of African driftwood to wash ashore. Be recognized as valuable, maybe sacred, then be carefully stored and preserved for over 2 centuries. And only then, after Europeans arrive in 1722 and introduce the idea of writing, someone finally decides to carve this ancient, precious piece of wood.
That seems like a lot of coincidences piled on top of each other, a very convoluted explanation.
It does seem less parsimonious, as scientists might say. The researchers in the 2024 study argue this complex old wood scenario is unlikely. The simpler explanation, Occam's razor, suggests the carving is roughly contemporary with the wood's arrival and use.
So while not 100% definitive proof of 15th century writing because of the old wood caveat,
the momentum has strongly shifted. The debate is now less about a lack of evidence for pre-contact and more about the specific probability of this elaborate old wood scenario. It's a fascinating ongoing discussion, but that date has fundamentally reshaped the field.
okay, beyond where it came from and how we lost it, the really fundamental puzzle is, what kind of system is Rongorongo? Is it true writing or something else? Define true writing for us again.
Sure. Linguists generally define true writing as a system that can graphically represent the full range of a spoken language. That means it needs more than just pictures for concepts, logograms.
It needs to represent sounds.
Exactly. It needs phonetic signs, often using the Rivas principle, like drawing a picture of a B to represent the sound B. That phonetic component gives a script flexibility to write anything you can say, new sentences, abstract ideas, grammar words.
Got it. So what's proto-writing, and why did people think Rongorongo might be that?
Proto-writing is more limited. It uses symbols, ideograms, as mnemonic cues, reminders, for something already known, like a chant or a story outline. But it can't systematically represent the full spoken language. Think of, like, trail markers or basic accounting symbols.
They convey information, but not full language.
Right. And for a long time, many researchers leaned towards Rongorongo being proto-writing. Why? Because decipherment attempts kept failing, and some early statistical analyses didn't seem to match typical language patterns. The idea was maybe it was just a complex memory aid for priests or chanters.
But you mentioned earlier, some physical features argue against that.
Yes. Things like the long structured texts, the complex combinations of glyphs, ligatures, and especially those corrections and erase texts we talked about.
The palimpsests?
Exactly. They suggest a level of systematic organization and rule following that seems to go beyond just simple memory jogs. It points towards proper language notation, aiming for precision.
So if it's likely more than proto-writing, what are the main models for what kind of system it is? How has thinking evolved?
Well, the field has moved through several hypotheses, generally getting more complex as simpler models failed. The first was the mnemonic device idea, like we just discussed. Glyphs are just cues, but it fails to explain the standardization, the linear order, the corrections.
Okay, so what next? Maybe just pictures for words.
That was the logographic script hypothesis. Each glyph is a whole word or concept, an ideogram. Seems intuitive because many glyphs are pictorial. A fish means fish.
Makes sense. But
The number of distinct basic glyphs, around 120, is way too low for a purely logographic system. Chinese has thousands. You can't write a full language with only 120 word signs. Attempts based on this led to those nonsensical yam yam taro taro translations.
right, clearly not working. What about representing sounds, like syllables? Polynesian languages often have simple syllable structures.
Exactly. That led to the syllabic script hypothesis. Each glyph represents a syllable, maybe consonant vowel. Scholars like Pozniakov pointed out the Rapa Nui language has about 55 possible syllables, and there are maybe 50-60 basic glyph forms. Close match.
That sounds promising. Statistical analysis supported it too.
Some statistical analyses did suggest syllabic properties, but the big problem is the total inventory. If it's purely syllabic, why are there over 400 variants in complex ligatures? A pure syllabary doesn't need that many signs.
So none of these models quite fit all the evidence on their own, which leads us to...
The emerging consensus. A logosyllabic script. This is a mixed system, like ancient Mayan or Egyptian hieroglyphs. It uses logograms, picture signs for whole words concepts, and syllabic signs for spelling out sounds, especially names or grammatical bits.
A hybrid system.
Exactly. It might also have determinative silent signs that clarify the meaning category of a word. This model is winning because it's the only one that seems capable of explaining all the features. The pictorial look, the large total number of signs, the linear structure, the corrections, and the crucial evidence from that one breakthrough.
The Mamari lunar calendar, the one piece we can partially read. Tell us about that aha moment.
Right. On Tablet C, Mamari. Researchers like Thomas Barthel and later Jacques Guy noticed this repeating pattern, a sequence starting with a crescent moon glyph.
Logogram for moon or night.
That was the inference, yes. And attached to this moon glyph were other variable glyphs that changed each time the sequence repeated.
Okay.
They then compared this repeating pattern on the tablet to lists of the traditional Rapa Nui names for the 29 nights of the lunar month names that had been preserved perfectly through oral tradition.
And it matched.
It matched remarkably well. The sequence on the tablet lined up with the known sequence of night names.
Wow. So the variable glyphs attached to the moon sign?
The aha moment was realizing those variable glyphs were likely acting as phonetic complements. They were spelling out, syllabically, the specific sounds of each night's name attached to the general night logogram.
That's incredible. It shows both types of signs working together.
Precisely. It's the strongest single piece of evidence we have that Rongorongo is indeed logosyllabic, using both meaning-based signs and sound-based signs. It's our tiny Rosetta Stone, validating the whole logosyllabic approach as the most likely path forward. It's a glimpse into the system's logic.
Okay, let's talk about the actual attempts to decipher this thing over the last 150 years. It's been a dramatic story, right? High hopes, dead ends, even some pretty wild theories.
Oh, absolutely. Full of brilliant minds, frustrating failures, and yeah, some outright fantasy. It really shows how decipherment methodology has evolved. Early on, there were some serious pitfalls.
Like the Rongorongo Fringe.
Exactly. People like Dr. Alan Carroll in Sydney. He was convinced the Rapa Nui couldn't possibly have invented it, so he produced these just fantastical translations, linking it to pre-Inca gods from South America, lost continents like Mu or Atlantis. Total pseudoscience.
Didn't help things.
Not at all. But even the more serious attempts ran into trouble, often because the informants they relied on were, well, compromised.
Like Bishop Jason in Matoro.
That's the most famous example. Yasin worked extensively with Matoro Tawaure in Tahiti. Matoro would read the tablets by chanting.
But was he actually reading them?
It became pretty clear he was likely just improvising, reciting chants he knew by heart, maybe associating a glyph loosely with a chant segment, or just making things up to please the bishop.
So the famous Jocelyn list of glyphs and meanings wasn't reliable.
Unfortunately not. It was inconsistent, contradictory, and contained impossible entries, like a gloss for porcelain, something completely unknown on ancient Rapa Nui. It wasn't the Rosetta Stone people hoped for.
And there was another informant, Ui Vaeko.
Yes, an elder, supposedly one of the last literate people. He recited chants for William Thompson, including the Atua Matori creation chant. But apparently he was very unwilling, and his recitations were full of Tahitian words, even European loanwords like French flag.
Making their authenticity as pure ancient texts highly questionable.
Very much so. These early failures really hammered home a point.
Yeah.
You couldn't just rely on potentially flawed ethnographic accounts. The key had to lie inside the script, in its structure.
Which brings us to the Russian school, a major shift in approach.
A crucial paradigm shift, mid-20th century. The St. Petersburg, then Leningrad, group Butanov, Norozov, Fedorova. Norozov was already famous for his work on Mayan.
What did they do differently?
They stopped asking, what does it say? And started asking, how is it built? They began a rigorous scientific structural analysis. Treat the corpus as a closed system, analyze it internally.
Like code breaking, figure out the rules first.
Exactly. Their huge contribution was methodology. Painstaking statistical analysis comparing parallel passages across different tablets. They created the first really methodologically sound inventories of the signs, distinguishing basic glyphs from combined forms, ligatures.
So they laid the essential groundwork.
Absolutely essential groundwork. Now, their own attempts at full translation, assuming it was purely logographic, didn't work. They got those yam, taro results. But their method of structural analysis proved to be the only viable path forward.
And now, fast forward to the 21st century, we're seeing another revolution thanks to digital tools.
It's truly another game changer. Digital humanities are providing tools undreamt of before. First, advanced imaging. We now know those old hand-drawn transcriptions by Barthel or Fisher, while heroic for their time, contain inaccuracies.
So we need better copies.
We need perfect copies. Researchers are creating ultra-high-resolution 3D models using photogrammetry for texture and color and structured light scanning, SLS, for precise geometric shape. Projects like Inscribe are leading this.
What do these 3D models let you do that you couldn't before?
The advantages are huge. They're far more accurate than any drawing. They reveal previously invisible details, those faint preliminary sketches, traces of erased glyphs, subtle corrections the scribe made.
Wow, you can see the process.
You can see the process. You can precisely measure glyph depth, helping sort intentional carving from accidental scratches. It's allowing the creation of a new, vastly more accurate master text for the whole corpus, accessible to researchers everywhere. It's like finally having the original manuscripts in pristine condition.
So a much better data set. And what about using computers to actually analyze that data?
That's the other side of the digital coin, applying computational linguistics and machine learning. Early attempts used things like n-gram analysis to find recurring patterns.
And now, more advanced AI.
More recent proposals are exploring sequence-to-sequence C2-seq models. These are techniques borrowed from fields like cryptography and automatic translation. The idea is to train these models to find statistical correlations between Rongorongo glyph sequences and the known texts of ancient Rapa Nui chants and oral traditions.
Trying to find a statistical key, basically.
Essentially, yes. Can the computer find robust, non-random mappings between patterns in the script and patterns in the known language?
Has it worked yet?
No full breakthrough yet, but it's a hugely powerful new approach. These tools can analyze the entire 15,000 glyph corpus for patterns invisible to the human eye. The potential is enormous. The tools are better than ever.
Okay, shifting gears slightly. To really get Rongorongo, we need to understand its place in Rapa Nui culture. It wasn't just writing for everyday stuff, was it?
No, not at all, like, say, shopping lists or business ledgers. All evidence points to it being a sacred technology, deeply woven into the political, spiritual, and intellectual fabric of the elite.
So literacy wasn't widespread.
Almost certainly not. It seems to have been the exclusive domain of a very small group. The aristocracy, Yoriki, and the priestly class, Iviatua. These specialists, the Tangata Rongorongo, the Rongorongo men, were the designated keepers of the island's history, myths, genealogies, sacred knowledge.
And the tablets themselves were special.
They were considered sacred objects, imbued with mana, spiritual power. They were likely subject to strict tapu ritual prohibitions. Handling them, reading them, maybe even seeing them was probably restricted.
And that elite control explains why the knowledge was so fragile.
Exactly. when that specific class, the knowledge keepers, was decimated by the slave raids. The knowledge vanished with them. It wasn't common knowledge that could easily survive.
The indigenous name you mentioned, Cho Motumorushuru, lines incised for chanting out. That tells us a lot about its function too, right?
A huge clue right in the name. It explicitly links the static, carved glyphs to the dynamic, performed oral tradition. It wasn't meant for silent reading like we do.
It was a script for performance.
Likely meant to be recited, declaimed, probably sung or chanted aloud, almost certainly in formal ceremonial settings. It was a tool to ensure the precise transmission of sacred texts across generations, hugely important in oral society to keep the history and rituals exact.
Like sheet music for cultural memory.
That's a great analogy, ensuring the performance is accurate every time.
And oral tradition even remembered different types of tablets.
Yes, which reinforces their role as repositories of specific knowledge. They remembered names like Chotau, lines of years, probably annals, maybe king lists.
Chronicle.
Exactly. Then Sho Ika, lines of fishes. But Ika, fish, was apparently a metaphor for war casualties.
So lists of the dead from battles.
That's likely.
Yeah.
Solemn records, vital for tracking kinship, alliances, maybe vendettas. And also Choranga, lines of fugitives, maybe those who fled or were exiled.
So really core cultural information. What about genealogies and myths, central to Polynesian culture?
Recording genealogies, the Kushao Tao perhaps, is seen as one of the most probable functions. That list-like repetitive structure you see in many Rongorongo texts, very typical of Polynesian oral genealogies, tracing lineage back to founding ancestors and gods, essential for status and identity.
Have people tried to match glyphs to figures in those genealogies?
There's speculation, yes, linking recurring glyphs to key gods or ancestors, like maybe a turtle glyph for the god Rongo, a shark glyph for his father Tangaroa. These were ancestors of the first king, Hotumatua, so texts with those glyphs might be royal genealogies of the ruling Miro clan. Still speculative, though.
And the big creation myths and stories.
Also very likely encoded. The Atua Materi creation chant, the one Iervai Aiko recited, has that classic Polynesian structure. X copulated with Y and produced Z, detailing the birth of the cosmos. Fisher claimed his controversial decipherment of the Santiago staff found exactly that repeating procreation triad structure.
Whether his translation was right or not, the structure might be there.
Possibly. Myths about the creator god Make, the Birdman cult, all that rich mythology was almost certainly part of what the script preserved. It was their sacred library.
And that powerful connection you mentioned earlier between the script glyphs and the ancient petroglyphs, the rock art all over the island, that feels really significant for its origins.
It's huge. The rock carvings, thousands of them, share this common symbolic language with the script. Iconic figures appear in both.
Like the Birdman.
The Tangata Manu, definitely.
Yeah.
Frigate birds, sea turtles, canoes, anthropomorphic figures. You see them carved in rock, and you see them as glyphs on the tablets.
What does that tell us, fundamentally?
Two really important things. One, it strongly supports that independent local invention idea. They weren't copying foreign symbols. They were drawing from their own deep, ancient well of sacred imagery.
Makes sense.
And two, it suggests how the script might have developed. It was likely a process of systematizing these powerful individual symbols, organizing them into a linear rule-governed system to record more complex information than a single rock carving could.
Taking their existing visual language and turning it into writing.
Exactly. Rongorongo represents the formalization of Rapa Nui's symbolic world into a true technology of memory. So its loss wasn't just losing a script. It was like losing the culture's primary hard drive, the master record of who they were.
So wrapping this up, Rongorongo remains this profound, alluring enigma. After 150-plus years, the glyphs are still stubbornly silent, a voiceless literature.
A real challenge to human ingenuity, both its creation and our attempts to understand it.
But we do know some things. There's consensus on its unique features, like reverse boustrophodon. We know about the tragically small corpus of artifacts.
When we understand the catastrophic loss of knowledge in the 1860s, the slave raids, disease, targeting the elite who held the key.
Plus, that Mamari lunar calendar breakthrough is solid. It gives us that anchor point, strongly suggesting a logosyllabic system.
And there's real optimism about the new imaging technologies, creating that high-fidelity data set for future work. Progress is being made on that front.
Yet the big questions, the disagreement, persist. The ultimate origin, pre-contact, independent invention, or post-contact stimulus is still debated.
Even with the 2024 dating bombshell, that old wood problem keeps the debate alive. though the needle has definitely moved towards pre-contact.
And the fundamental nature of the script itself, even if we accept logosyllabic, the exact mix.
The exact balance between logograms and phonetic signs, the role of potential determinatives, that's still completely unclear, which means the meaning of almost all 15,000 glyphs remains a mystery. The library is still locked.
So what is the path forward? How do we keep chipping away at this?
Well, while full decipherment might still be a long way off, the path seems clear. It's systematic, data-driven. First, complete the dataset.
Image and date everything.
High-precision radiocarbon dating and 3D imaging on all the artifacts. Nail down the old wood problem as much as possible. Create that universally accessible, definitive master text. Get everyone working from the same accurate page.
Then refine the analysis based on that better data.
Exactly. Use the 3D models to create a universally accepted glyph inventory. Resolve the ambiguities, identify all the variants properly. A solid sign list is non-negotiable.
And keep pushing the computational analysis.
Yes. Fully unleash the power of computational linguistics. Refine those seek-to-sect models. Test rigorously for correlations between glyph sequences and known Rapa Nui chants or genealogies.
Oh.
Let the machines find patterns we can't see. That offers the best hope for finding structural clues.
Rongorongo really stands as this incredible testament, doesn't it, to the creativity, the resilience of this isolated human society.
Absolutely. It's a monument, just as significant as the moai, to the Rapa Nui people's drive to record their world, preserve their history, connect to their ancestors.
And whether we ever fully crack it or not.
Its very existence challenges our neat categories about where and how writing originates. It shows the diversity of human intellectual achievement, and it's such a poignant reminder of how fragile cultural knowledge can be. Its silence represents a profound, irretrievable loss.
The quest to understand it is more than just linguistics, then.
It really is. It's an effort to recover a lost voice from the deep past, to honor a unique chapter in the human story. So maybe a final thought for you, our listeners.
Yeah.
What other hidden technologies of memory, like Rongorongo, might still be out there waiting to be rediscovered? Or how many have already been lost forever in other remote corners of the world? And what does this specific story, Rongorongo's silence, teach us about how precious and how vulnerable human knowledge truly is?